you can make a really big shift in 90 days. One of the things I'll always say with my business coaching clients is that the things that you're doing today, you're not going to see the fruit of, in most cases, 60 to 90 days of you implementing that strategy. All right, welcome back to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I am your host, Kendra Hewitt, and this is episode 7, how I reverse engineer my money goals and how you can do it too. So this is probably one of my most favorite things to talk about. It is one of my most favorite things to do with my clients. I do a similar process for business coaching, but this is also really applied and how I actually do my money goals on a quarterly basis. So I am going to walk you through my whole process and give you some hopefully guidelines and possibly a download to do this yourself. So I want to start off with just bringing awareness to um, how we measure our success. Like, I find that if any of you have read the book, which I highly recommend to, The Gap or the Gain, it's by a guy named Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy. Dan Sullivan's probably one of the more elite coaches in the entrepreneurial space, probably one of the most popular ones. He founded a company called Strategic Coach. And I'm not affiliated with him in any ways, but I love this book. I reference it a lot. It is dog-eared the heck out of. And one of the concepts they teach that I really, really love and I wanted to kick up this episode with is how they run this exercise where they ask a bunch of entrepreneurs how they measure their success. And what they find is that the natural inclination for you when that question is proposed is that your brain wants to go like to this vision of where you should be, and where you should be, it puts you in this position called the gap, where it's you're thinking about all of the things you're not, or the things you don't have, or the things you haven't done, things you should have done differently. And it gets you stuck in scarcity because it keeps you in this gap where you are constantly basically self-critical, and you feeling stuck basically. And then the concept of the gain, focusing on the gain, is comparing yourself to where you were before. And it could be yesterday, it could be a month before, it could be a year before, it can be any period of time. But this is where you start when you start to identify the gain and you start to identify wins, then you start to focus on the wins rather than the things that are not done, the things that you should have done differently. And those wins help build momentum, and momentum builds energy, and energy has forward momentum that is then contagious. And I like to say that, like, this is how I feel about setting money targets, is because at the beginning where we start can sometimes be really painful. But what you're going to start to see through this process is that you start to gather data that you can then compare to, that puts you in the gain instead of keeping you stuck in the gap. So I took this quote from the book and I wrote it out just so I could read it because I was like, it really stuck with me. And it's one that I really had to embrace and start to learn, which was each win, big or small, is important. And any move you make, if you do an activity and identify your daily wins, the more you see your wins, the greater and greater opportunities for wins present themselves. So I really want you to start to really see, because where we're going to start today is not necessarily um, always counting our wins, but we're going to work up to that. And I'm going to give you some bonus steps too that I just started implementing actually from the Gap or Gain book that have been game changer in not only my own life, but the lives of some of the coaching clients I have. So first off, my first step in my doing my money goals, which I do on a quarterly basis. That's how I like to set it. So every 90 days, I set time aside to walk through this process. There is a 30-day check-in that I'm also going to go over in this episode today because I really want it to become a habit. Now, here's what's really key. This is my process for every aspect of my life. So, whether it is my body and my health, whether it is my relationship and my marriage, whether it is, or my relationship with my daughter, whether it is my spirituality, what I call my being, or my business target. So, business target being my businesses and or my personal finances. This is the exact process I follow for all four of those categories. So, first off, I want you to start by identifying where you are today. This is where you get the opportunity to tell the real, raw truth. And you're going to state your facts. Now, what's really key here is that you want to state your facts when it comes to your money, regardless about how you feel about them. Right? Most of us, our butt starts to pucker a little bit when we say, "Oh shit, I have to identify facts." What are some of the typical money facts I write down here? Here's what I brought in last month. Here's what my sales were last month. Here's what we spent last month in our both our business and our personal lives. Here is other facts where we spent more than we anticipated. We went on vacation and I paid for everything up front, but we spent this much on our vacation. And I want all of this data so that I can do future planning and reverse engineer my goals in the future as well. So this is where I'm going to get really, really raw. This is how much debt I have. This is what my balance on my credit card is. I have 6 credit cards. Whatever those details are for you, this is where you're going to start listing out where you are today. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to list and review where you were 90 days ago. Now, this is why you'll see doing this process every 90 days is really critical, because if you did this process 90 days ago, you're going to have data to go off of that's pretty accurate. This is where we start to move from the gap to the gain, right? Because a lot of us, when we start to list the facts, there's usually some good wins in the facts of the money that came in or how your money moved last 90 days. But there's also usually a little bit of pain associated. And we're much more apt to move away from the pain rather than towards it. So I really want you to start to identify on that first step, what are your current facts in the most raw, honest way you can possibly. No one's going to see this unless you're going to share it with a coach. Then I really, or even your partner, which I do encourage you to do. But there's a whole process for that too. So start by identifying where you yourself are currently at when it comes to money. Number 2 is, like I said, you're gonna list and review where you are at, and this is where I love the concept they teach in Gap or Gain called always measure backwards. Meaning that, just like I said at the beginning, when you ask these entrepreneurs how they measure their success, at first their brain right away wants to go towards the things that they haven't done. We always look at the things that maybe we need to do differently, we need to change, or in my case, I look at the things I don't want. And this is where you really start to have to make a shift on focusing on the things that where you were the last 90 days so that you can start to move from the gap into the gain portion where you're starting to look at, hey, I had some wins. I had some things that went great rather than get stuck on the things that you didn't do or you didn't know how to do or you wish you did differently. And I like to look at the return and report, I call this part, where I list and review where I was 90 days ago. It's also critical if this is your first time doing this exercise, you look and revise where you were 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, or 5 years. Here's what I find when I give people that time frame. If you ask someone to remind themselves where they were 5 years ago, it's sometimes a much broader picture, but it actually gives you a really good idea of like, wow, I've come a long way, even though that was 5 years ago. When you start to get smaller in the increments of time, it's a little bit harder to see the gain. That's why I really like the range of the 90 days, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years. Because what is amazing is that, like 5 years ago, what I brought in for money, I would have just been like, I mean, I was just barely like, that was barely paying for our lifestyle. And if you told me now 5 years later that I would be bringing in what I'm bringing in now, I wouldn't have believed you because I didn't have those skill sets that were required or the mindset required to be where I am at today. I hope I look back 5 years from now to this day and I feel the same way. But the only way that I can do that is if I have some actual measurement of metrics, and time is moving at such, I don't know if it's just me, it feels like it's moving at such a warp speed that it's really, really critical to document this and force your brain to think back that far because a lot of people can't remember details that far back of where they were in their money. So it's really critical in this step to really go back that far and also see the difference in just 90 days. Because what you're going to start to see is that you can make a really big shift in 90 days. One of the things I'll always say with my business coaching clients is that the things that you're doing today, you're not going to see the fruit of, in most cases, 60 to 90 days of you implementing that strategy or whatever it is, or making the change that you make, right? So this is really critical that you start to measure backwards of like where you came from so that when you are going forward, it seems like you have momentum of wins. And you're really focusing on the things that really comparing yourself, the version of you today to a previous version of you so you can see that there is growth and gain there. And the next step, the third step, is where do you want to be 90 days from now? So if you're here today and you brought in, $10,000 a month and then you have, $5,000 in credit cards right now and whatever that story looks like for you, what does it look like in 90 days? Do you want that $5,000 gone? Do you want to bring in $15,000 in 90 days? Um, is that realistic for you, or is that a bit of a stretch for you? Where do you really want to be? And I really encourage you in this 90-day period is that you really want to stretch a little bit. You want to put something that seems somewhat a little bit of a reach for you. You don't want to say, "Hey, my goal is that I made $10,000 this month and I want to maintain that $10,000 90 days from now." Because what we're looking for is to start to build a bridge from where you are today to where you want to be in your money 90 days from now. And for some people, this is going to bring up like, oh shit stuff, right? Where it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine what I would have to do to make that difference. I feel like I don't have influence over that. And that's the gap of the bridge that we really need to start to close. And that brings me to the next step, which is going to be your focus items. And your focus items are going to be what you set for on a monthly basis. And this is where I teach that the rubber really meets the road on this process. Because if I know where I want to be 90 days from now, this is where the reverse engineering is going to start to come in, right? So let's take the goal of that you want to make an additional $5,000, a month. So you want to go from, or let's say total to make it easy, right? So let's say that you brought in $10,000 this quarter, this previous quarter, and you want to bring in $15,000 for the next quarter. That's your next 90-day target. What I want you to start to think about is like now you have to reverse engineer what it would take to do that, right? So the actual math to do it, but also too is what is the one thing that you would add that would change that $5,000 increment in 90 days? Would it be one more sale? Would it be of your program? Would it be one more commission and a real estate sale? What would it be? And start to really see, because if you start to look at it this way, what you find is you start to chunk it down and it actually doesn't seem as big of a reach as it did at first, because you're starting to reverse engineer that process downward. So, what do you want that goal to be 90 days from now? Then shifting to our focus item is that once I know what that is, so in our case right now, it's $5,000 more in income in the next 90 days, I can start to break it down. So I could offer a new program. I could make more time for sales calls and then offer, depending on what price point you sell at. For me, my last one is, I also always put an education one on here. So I wanted to reread Profit First. This is my focus items for February. I need to revise a life insurance policy we have. I need to open a new business bank account because I want to shift our business banking to a online bank and not a physical bank anymore. And then maybe it's a debt repayment goal. Maybe it's that you want to pay off one of your credit cards. It could be anything, but the goal is to come up with 4 items that reverse engineer towards that 90-day goal. Help you move closer to it. It might not be that $5,000 number, but it might be like, "Hey, I'm gonna offer a new program and I'm gonna sell 10 people at $500 each." Right? And it might be that their focus item for the 10 people might be you wanna get 4 sales, 1 sale a week, at the $500. It might be, "Hey, I need to create that program this month." And that might be your focus item. Um, and then your next focus item might be, "Hey, next month, I'm gonna market it." And then I'm gonna measure at the end of the 90 days again. And I'm going to figure out if those focus items really brought me closer to it. And now here's a really, important part about focus items that, again, I always am reminding my clients. Focus items are goals you have that are important to you to gain momentum and move yourself forward, but they are not necessarily urgent. Focus items are not like, I need to pay my excise tax bill. I need to pay this contractor that works for me. I need to do my taxes this month. Those are task-oriented to-do list items. Focus items are things that actually they do not have a deadline in most cases. They are something that is important to you, like creating a new program to hit that $5,000 goal or, marketing a new program or, adding a different revenue stream to your business. They are things that, like, you want to get done, but they are because they are important to you, but they are not on your urgent list. Urgent lists are things like, "Hey, the tax deadline's coming up, I need to complete them." Urgent list is this life insurance policy is going to expire, I need to revise it before it does and pay for it. Those are to-do item task lists that go on your regular to-do list when you do your weekly plan. But in my case, on focus items, my goal is the reason I always have 4 is that typically, with the exception of a couple, obviously, there is 4 weeks in 1 month. And I choose a focus item every month or every week that I'm going to put physically on my schedule. Now, I am old school in that I use Google Docs and or Google Calendar, and then I also use an actual physical planner. With that physical planner, I actually write my focus items on the column on the left-hand side, and then I move them to my schedule appropriately, right? So last week, for example, my focus item was to talk to about my life insurance agent about my policy so that she could get that all rolling and get that done. So that went on as an appointment with myself in a block of when I had time to do that. And so that was my focus item for the week. Then I take great pride in this. I love a big pink highlighter and I cross it out when it is done. Now there are weeks where those focus items don't get done. Don't get me wrong. And then I simply decide at the end of the month when I review them again, do I want to move them to my next month and or are they one that is actually irrelevant at this point? It doesn't really need to be done. It really wasn't that important. And it definitely wasn't an urgent task of some sort. So that's the real key is that setting the focus items. And I take on average, I would say about 1 hour a month to do this process. Again, this is on a monthly basis where I look at my focus items. Do this review where I look at the facts on my money. I look at where I've gained. And usually once you make the gain list on the listing, the where you were 90 days ago, where you were 6 months ago, where you were 1 year ago, I really only go that far. I don't do the 2 and 5 year every time because that's obviously a little bit more cumbersome. And then where I want to go in the next 90 days, the third step there, I always, set those, like I said, at the end of the quarter for the following quarter. So right now, I have this scheduled for the end of March. I will get this whole process done, and I will project forward for the next 90 days being Q2 of 2025. And then for the focus items, I always schedule that usually on a weekend, to be completely honest, where I do that, where I'm not in work mode. It's, working on my business instead of in it, and I set our money goals, and I do this for my both my businesses, and then I do it also for my, personal finances, and I then review it with my husband, um, when possible. I don't always do that, that's something that I'm working on, that I need to get a little bit better at, always evolving. That's why I like everybody to know that, I'm always a work in progress, just like all of us, but I really like to walk my talk. So, and then I have kind of a bonus item here for you that I've just started doing. I've actually started experimenting with a couple clients as well, and I've got some really good feedback from it. And this was came from the Gap or the Gain book as well, because it was something that really stuck out to me that I really struggled with in the past and still do at times. And that was this. Um, I think there's a lot of talk on people that are like, hey, get how you start the first hour of your day is the most important of your day. Now, this is something where I really have a lot of room for growth because it is not very consistent at all. And really putting yourself in power before you start the day. But I want to bring up something else that just recently started thinking of is like how you end your day is just as important as how you started. So, one of the things that stood out when I was thinking about and writing on my outline for this episode was I've been working with a professional therapist personally, and one of the things she helps me on a lot is some of like parenting, like adjusting to some parenting and different phases of parenting. And, one of the things she brought up for me, a couple weeks ago, which I shared with my mom's group because it impacted me so much, was this. And all of us, I'm sure, that are listening are moms, um, learning how to juggle both, right? Like our money and our kids. And both of them kind of go hand in hand at times, right? So I want you to think about this concept and just really kind of how you can apply it to yourself. And the rule she taught was about she called it the 9-minute rule. And she said, you have 3 times that you really touch your child in terms of connect with them, 3 opportunities to connect with them on a daily basis. The first 3-minute interval is 3 minutes right before when you wake them up. And that is, how you wake them up, your tone, your intention. Is it chaotic? Is it fun? Is it grateful? Is it peaceful? What is that 3 minutes? And that is really critical to how they start the day. Just like I said, how you start your day is really critical to you. That first, I like to say, more than 3 minutes, the really 60 minutes. Many of us need to get up before our kids are, myself included, to really get that time. Sometimes it's 30 minutes. Sometimes it is 3 minutes. We worked with it, right? The second 3-minute interval is when you drop them off and pick them up from school. So it's obviously 3 minutes. They're saying like a couple minutes while you have them present with you when how you're dropping them off or leaving them before they go to school and how you're receiving them when they come back. And then the third interval, the 3 minutes, is when you put them to bed, how you put them to bed. And it really got me thinking about how, like, this, I've been really intentional with this with my daughter lately. And it really got me thinking too on we need this as adults. I find so much of the stuff of teaching my daughter's a toddler, she's 4. So, like, so many things that I'm learning to be a parent as a toddler is so applicable to my life. It's kind of funny and scary at the same time. So, really, it got me started thinking on like, hey, how I start my day is important, but how I end my day is important too. And then fast forward to reading The Gap or the Gain this last weekend when I was skiing with my family. and I got 30 minutes of uninterrupted reading time while the snow fell. It was glorious, um, and very rare. And the concept of counting your wins before bed. And what they talked about was this is another frame of the measure backwards, right? Of comparing yourself to where you were to where and then getting yourself to where you are now rather than where you want to be. And he talked about how that the critical things that happen when you are going to bed and how your brain is functioning and what is being inputted before bed is so, so critical to how you start the day the next day. And one of the things that really stuck with me as he was talking about how most people, they go to bed and they right before bed, they're looking for a way to escape. They're watching TV or worse, they're on their iPhone or some people are playing video games. All of these things that are super overstimulating to your brain in not a good way. And I especially and I'm guilty of it myself at times of like really the social media, right? And I want you to think about starting to do 3 things before you go to bed, just like the 3 minutes, and I've been starting to do it with my daughter. And the first thing that way I ask her is, what's a win you had today? And, something that went well, and I always define the win as, like, what was something good today? What that happened? And we count your win first, and I started doing this for myself of like, "Hey, can I count my win?" Because it's so easy for me to get in this habit of writing the things I didn't do down or I need to do tomorrow. And I'm just programming my brain to already feel behind. And so this is really rewiring a bonus step of counting your wins. And I'm keeping this in a journal. I use an app now to do this. But I'm doing these 3 things. One is count your win first. The second thing I do is I put something I'm grateful for. And then the third thing is I put something down that I'm praying for or a person I'm praying for. And I've been starting to do this with my daughter where we count her win. She says something she's grateful for. Sometimes it's really funny, like I let her have ice cream today. Um, and other times it's actually like really you can see what's on their heart. And then someone you're praying for. And I have really, really seen the praying one is really been huge and pivotal for me personally because it's increased my intimacy with God, but also with my daughter. Like I start to know, like, hey, here's what's on her heart. So I want you to start thinking about like, how do you end your day? Is it like you flop into bed, you don't even have a minute to say goodnight to your significant other because you're already sleeping by the time your head hits the pillow because it's the first time you sat down today? And how does this relate to money targets? So thinking about even like you could count your win with money as you're starting to build your relationship with money. I have a couple clients that's what I'm doing with them. Really super baby steps. They are doing one thing that they are grateful for, and then one thing that they can count as a win today when it comes to their money or their business. I have a lot of clients that like prayers are not in their everyday life. So that is something that I hope I maybe might influence in the future. But everybody's on their own path with that in their spirituality. So I don't really teach that part of it. I'm just bringing it up right now because I feel compelled to share my experience so that maybe you can make this experience your own of counting your win at the end of the day. And I think it's really critical to, like I said, especially when it comes to setting money targets, to be able to identify and see some wins that you have rather than focus on the negative, especially when you want to shift and heal your relationship with money. So, just food for thought. I hope these tips, I'm going to review them in closing one more time. You're going to start by identifying where you are at today with your money target, with your money. The second thing you're gonna do is you're gonna compare where you were with your money 90 days ago, 6 months ago, 1 year ago, at a very minimum, bonus points for, 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Then you're going to start. Third step is going to be, where do you want to be 90 days from now? You're going to paint the picture of the future. What do you want the future to look like? And then the fourth step is going to be on your focus items, identifying your focus items and scheduling them. So, taking the time to say, hey, here are four things that I need to do to gain money momentum and start to move some stuck energy in my money by taking action and actually putting them on your schedule. And the bonus part is really thinking about, how are you going to count your wins at the end of the day? And like I said, this could be your money win, it could be any win, but just really starting the habit of counting your win before bed, to programming yourself so you get up with a little pep in your step, a little bit of excitement, and maybe even motivation to really start to do some of the things that really matter to you when it comes to your money. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to my channel, and share it with anybody that you might think might find this information would be really valuable. Just a reminder, too, there's a link in the show notes for two things. One is to join my email list. And when you do, you will get a free identifying your current money blueprint download. This is my cornerstone of my exercise, where if you really want to build and heal your relationship with your money, that's the exercise I have all my clients do. And then, if the second thing that you want to do is, if you want to join me live, my next masterclass is at the end of the month. The link is also in the show notes here, where you can join us for Master Your Money Game, where I walk you through some of these target setting processes, but we do them together, and I take live Q&As from people that are looking to up and master their money game. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.